If you're someone who's interested in getting this guy, you're gonna have two questions. One, what controllers does it work with? And two, does it have added input lag and how does it perform? And here's the full list. I think what they mean here is Xbox Series and Xbox One, also Xbox 360. It's a pretty big list. Also PS3, PS4, and PS5. Check this out. Switch controllers, PC, hitbox on the list here, and also Neo Geo, the 8-bit doll. Now that we know it works with a whole bunch of controllers, the next question is, how does it perform? Does it have any added input lag? I'm gonna be honest with you, when I first started using this guy, I was super excited. I just loved the idea of being able to play my Xbox controllers on the PS5. However, as I use it more and more, I started to notice something. I started to notice that my games were kind of stuttery. It doesn't look stuttery, but it feels stuttery. It just doesn't feel as smooth as it normally is without a converter. And some controllers are worse than others when using this converter. Unfortunately, the Xbox controllers are particularly bad with this converter. And the reason for this is something called jitter. Jitter is exactly like it sounds. You know how you drink a lot of caffeine and you kind of get jittery, right? So you're kind of all over the place. And that's what this is. The converter doesn't send information to the PS5 in a consistent pace. All right, check out this test. This is with the converter. For most of them, it's 7.80 something milliseconds. And then you're going to get 15 milliseconds there, 23. If you go down the list, it's not consistent. It'll be a 7, all of a sudden it's 40, and then 47 at the bottom, and then 15. When you compare to using the controller without the converter, check out these numbers. They're all pretty much the same, around 7 milliseconds. Just very consistent. There's just not a lot of variance going from one button press to the next. And this kind of makes sense, right? Because the controller will send the information to the converter, and then the converter have to do its magic, do its thing, and then send it to the PS5, and then the PS5 have to read it. And I could be wrong here, but I'm thinking maybe perhaps sometimes there's just too much information and that results in the converter taking longer to process. I'm not sure if the converter needs a faster chip or maybe it just needs more power. If that's the case, I really don't mind plugging it in somewhere to provide more juice. Because you gotta think about it, this converter is made for the fighting game community, right? And they should have known that we are input lag snobs. Speaking of input lag, let's take a look at it. I've shown the PlayStation numbers before, but let's go it over again quickly. Let's take a look at the DualShock 4. So without a converter, you can see the minimum and the maximum is very close. With the converter, minimum and maximum, the difference is huge. This is where the jitter comes from. On average, it's about a couple milliseconds off. But if you look at the jitter here, without a converter, 0.06, super fast. But with the converter, you get 3 milliseconds of jitter. And the polling rate went from 258 to 168. So it's roughly 100 hertz slower than without a converter. And if you look at all the polling rates, they're around the same range, right? Around 160 to 170 range. This looks like it's the output for PlayStation controllers. Check this out, the DualSense Edge without a converter is over 1000 hertz. With a converter, it went all the way down to 167. Now let's go back to the jitter. It's the same for the DualSense. It went from 0.08 to over 4 milliseconds of jitter. With the Edge, barely any jitter at all, right? 0.03. With the converter, it's almost 3. When it comes to the Xbox controllers, it's even worse. Without a converter, minimum is 2.35, maximum is about 12. And then with a converter, minimum is around the same, 2.91. And then maximum is 71, 72 milliseconds. The range is just huge. Average input delay, we went from 7.83 to about 11.32. That's an additional 4 milliseconds. But to be honest with you, this is not the important part. I can deal with the added input delay if it's consistent, but it's not, because look at the jitter. It went from 0.78 to 8.52. Think jitter as the variance, right? Plus or minus. And this is the reason why when I first started testing the controllers, it just felt off. It just felt stuttery. Right? You go down to the Elite Series 2, same thing here with the jitter. 0.07, it went up to 6.8 with the Elite Series 2 core. 0.03, it went up to 7 with the converter. Polling rate, all of the Xbox controllers range around 127 Hz. With the converter, it went down to the mid 80s. And this makes sense, right? Because the converter has to convert information to send it to the PS5. I was curious, so I also tested the Wolverine V2 Chroma and the Wolverine V2 Pro as well. And I see the same thing. Without a converter, the range is really close, from 3.5 to about 8 milliseconds. But then with the converter, 1.26 to 52. And the reason for that is this. Check this out. Without a converter, it's buttery smooth, 0.05 milliseconds of jitter. With it, 2.63. Polling rate went from 257 to 163 Hz. And we have an additional 2.5 milliseconds of lag here. On the V2 Pro, same thing. Without a converter, the range is just really close. With the converter, look at this range. It's over 85 milliseconds variance. It's crazy. And look at the jitter. Buttery smooth without a converter. With a converter, we have over 5 milliseconds of jitter. Polling rate went from 520 to 268 Hz. And this number is interesting. Check this out. With the DualSense Edge, without a converter, it's over 1100 Hz. But with the converter, it still outputs at 167, which is the same range as the other PlayStation controllers. But with the V2 Pro, it's able to go above that. This is the highest I've seen it with the converter, so I'm curious to why that is. On the website, it claims that the converter has ultra low latency, smooth operation, instant response. Well, we know that's not true. It says that it's using technologies that's going to result in ultra low latency and stable gaming. You can argue that the added latency is not bad, but there is no way that this is stable. If you define stable as working, then sure, but it's nowhere close to stable. There's two firmware options. One is the tournament version, and this is the firmware that I'm using. It just converts the controller and allows you to use it on the PS5. There's also the standard version. It's got turbo, macro, and then you can remap buttons and stuff. And there you have it. This is the Brook FGC converter. Wow, it's cool that so many controllers work on this guy, but I'm gonna have to be honest with you. The actual playing experience is not so great. It's really stuttery. The jitter is just so annoying. I just don't feel connected to the controller when using this converter. And it really is a shame, I'm gonna have to tell you. Wow, as cool as it is, and it works, but unfortunately it's just not as smooth as it needs to be. I'm sure it's fine if you use this casually, but competitively, this is no good. Alright, that's going to be it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.